I'm here today with NAMI Associate Medical Director, Dr. Christine M. Crawford. The pandemic has changed a lot of normal society that we're all used to, and it's kind of tested a lot of us during these trying times. But life will also be completely different post-pandemic. So my question is, how will youth resilience be tested during post-pandemic times?
During the pandemic, youth were challenged in a variety of different ways. For a lot of young people, this was the first time that they've experienced grief, that they've experienced loss. And it's probably the first time, too, that they've had to look for other coping strategies to be able to manage all of the stress that this pandemic brought along with it. My hope is that as we emerge from this pandemic and return to what will be our new normal in this post-pandemic world, is that young people can use those same strategies and skills that they acquired during the pandemic to help them through the challenges of transitioning back to school, the challenges of being in environments with their friends, with peers their age, and also being away from home where they've been spending a lot of time being around family members. And it's going to be quite a challenge for a lot of these young people to now be separated from their loved ones, especially during a time in which they realize that the world is full of uncertainty. And so I hope that people can remember that they were able to get through all of the hardships and challenges from the pandemic, and they'll be able to get through any obstacles that they may face in the post-pandemic world.
Many mental health issues go unnoticed by peers, friends, family, and even sometimes by the person suffering themselves. So, what are some signs that we should look for to indicate that a young person is struggling?
Well, this is a fantastic question because oftentimes it's difficult not only for the person who's experiencing the mental health problem to know if there is a real problem, and it's also hard for parents, for caregivers, for teachers to be able to recognize some of those signs and symptoms, especially in young people who are going through a lot of different challenges, who have, their hormones are really having an influence on their mood, and they're facing a lot of new challenges for the first time. And so we could see a variety of different emotional responses to that. But when there is a concern that the young person isn't functioning at the level that they were before, that is a cause for concern. So what do I mean by they're not functioning that well? So if they're having problems getting out of bed, if they're not showering, if they're not eating, they're not sleeping, and it seems as though they're not able to maintain some of the connections that they had before with their friends and their family, and they seem more withdrawn, I would argue that that is a cause for concern, especially if it goes on for at least 2 weeks in a row. And when it comes to depression, it doesn't mean that the individual is crying all the time and they appear really sad, but they can also be kind of moody and irritable. And those are the signs that are difficult for people to acknowledge because some teens, some youth people, young people are irritable when things happen. But if you notice that change in mood, in addition to them not being able to keep up with what they need to do, then I worry. And then the other area that I worry about is when people are feeling so down and so overwhelmed that they think the only option for them is to hurt themselves. Then that really is an emergency, and they certainly need to get more immediate help.
If someone does notice some of the signs of mental health issues, what are some tips that you have for those wanting to reach out and help someone that's struggling?
Yeah, this is a really, really great question. Oftentimes, people like to kind of shy away from folks that they run into who may be having a mental health problem. I say rather than turning a blind eye to it or shying away from it, lean into it. Be curious as to what's going on with this person rather than making assumptions. So, one practical way to do that is to just state the obvious. Say, I noticed that you're acting a little different and that things seem to be a little bit harder for you. I was wondering what's behind that. Is there any way that I could help out? And that opens a conversation for the person to be able to share what it is that they've been keeping inside them. Oftentimes, when we ask people how they're doing, we're not really asking it because we want to know the full story, but we just ask it because it's like a common thing to ask people when you see them. But I also recommend that when you ask the question, really mean it and say, how are you really feeling? Because these are challenging times, and I know it's been hard for me. What has it been like for you? And if we could continue to normalize some of these conversations, then people will maybe able to initiate these conversations on their own. The more we could talk about the mental health of people, the better off everyone will be. The other thing too is that if someone is struggling and they're not really engaging in a conversation with you about how they're really feeling and what's going on, um, you can certainly turn to some trusted adults about how best to intervene. So whether that be talking to a teacher who's in the same class as your friend who may be having some difficulties, or if you're in an extracurricular activity, or you're on a sports team and you could talk to a coach about it, trying to just raise the signal or the red flag, if you will, to other trusted adults who may be able to access some resources for your friend or loved one.
For foster youth and other youth people with limited support systems, the post-pandemic transition can be especially difficult. What advice can you give them, and how can they find the support that they need?
Yeah, it's challenging when you're in a situation in which one can feel quite alone and isolated and feel as though life has posed a number of challenges that have made it difficult to attach to an adult figure. That's really hard. And we know that when people do not have the support that they need when they're going through emotional difficulties, it can make it really hard to recover from some of those challenges. So, what I would say for folks who are in foster care, one thing that you could do is talk to a case manager, caseworker that you have a relationship with, and let them know about what things have been like for you. There's often a lot of changes that happens when people are in foster care in terms of placement and in terms of school placements, where they're living. And that could be tough because we already went through a year and a half of experiencing a lot of uncertainty. But imagine if you've experienced a lifetime of uncertainty about who's going to be taking care of you and about where you're living. And so if you're able to identify one point person that you feel comfortable talking to and sharing with them what it is you're going through, that's really important. For some youth, that could be a hard person to identify. And so I really recommend people look at their school resources to see if there's a teacher, a guidance counselor, the principal, or any other trusted adult that you can talk to about what you're going through is really, really helpful because that person can then reach out to whatever resources could be beneficial for that youth.
So, with everything changing and as we move out of social distancing and integrating back into the world, many people can suffer from anxiety and are even hesitant to start moving back into the society we've seen before. Can you give young people some tips on how to get through the coming year of navigating post pandemic life?
Absolutely. So going back into real world, going back to school and going to social gatherings can be a great thing. It could be really exciting for a lot of people, but also it could be a great source of fear and worry for a lot of other people. And so the transition to the post pandemic world is going to look different for everyone. It's not going to be a one size fits all approach. And so, one thing I advise young people to keep in mind is that just because everyone around you seems to be doing fine, they don't seem to be anxious, it doesn't mean that they're not struggling too, that they're not anxious. People tend to put on a mask sometimes when they're out and about in the real world. And I want people to understand that what they see may not always be the truth. And so, one way to combat that is to have those honest conversations, as I mentioned before. So, even though someone's looking great, just ask, how are you really doing? So, that's one thing to start off with. The other thing is, especially when it comes to going to school or other social gatherings, ease your way into it. Don't feel as though you have to do a cannonball into the pool of social activities, but it's okay to just put your toes into the pool water to see how it feels for you. So, if that means going to school before school starts, just to get reacquainted with the school building, to walk around the hallways, to identify where your classes are, that could be one step that can lead to other steps to help to reduce your anxiety. So, first step could be going to check out the school. The next step could be to talk to some friends from school who you haven't seen in a while to just get a little bit more comfortable being around people. And then the next step could be, actually going to school and signing up for classes, doing a number of different things just to slowly build your way up to being back in school full time. So take the big challenge of the transition to a particular activity and just break it down into little small chunks that seems doable for you and things that you could work up towards over time.
Since the pandemic, I believe that a lot of people are beginning to realize the significance of friends and family and having a close network of people around you. And many are building relationships with those around them as well, like neighbors and those just around the block. Many people are starting to get closer to one another. And I think that continuing that support will do us all a good service to one another. But what can we do in our communities to help youth navigate post pandemic life? What can we all do to help each other?
Yes, I think one of the things about the pandemic is that people realize that for a long time, we took for granted all of the social connections that we have. And at the same time, people got really creative about ways to stay connected, whether that's using Zoom, whether that's using social media. And so people had the time on their hands as well as the use of technology to be able to connect. Now, given that people are going to be out and about more, I think it's important to find ways to maintain those connections that might have been enhanced during the pandemic. So, if that means actually scheduling times to hang out with your friends or scheduling times to call distant relatives and various family members, I think that would be a good thing to do. So, plug it into your calendar. Every Sunday at 10 a.m., I'm going to call grandma. Or every Friday night at 6 o'clock, I'm going to give my friend Danielle a call just to see how she's doing. And the more that you could build it into your routine, the more likely you are to be able to maintain those relationships. And imagine if you're able to place those phone calls to those people, they're going to feel good too. And that's going to promote their own emotional health and their mental health. And they may pay it forward and reach out to other people. And so being connected, it's really contagious because it just kind of spreads good feelings, good vibes to other people. And hopefully they'll be connected with other folks. Also, if you're not all that comfortable seeing people in person yet, and you really loved all of the Zoom meetings and the virtual connections, then continue that. That's totally fine. What we do know is that any type of social connection is a social connection. So just make sure to make it happen.
Thank you so much for the interview and sharing your expertise with us, Dr. Crawford.
Thanks so much for having me. I really enjoyed this.